Lavrov has spoken on this topic and we need to take him seriously. He's been in the job for 20 years and he is in the grand tradition of other former Russian foreign ministers like Nessa and Gakov in the 19th century. He understands his own people, his own state, he understands what President Putin is trying to achieve, and he's made it abundantly clear the period of negotiation is at an end. There's no longer any willingness to do that. So I think the Russians are now on a path to what I would call final resolution of the conflict. Not sure what that looks like, but I certainly think it looks like Ukraine without Zelensky and the regime in Kiev. Colonel Douglas MacGregor, who foresaw the outcomes of this conflict, wouldn't be more shocked by last night's events. Russia's third wave of strikes wasn't just a skirmish, it was a calculated show of force, a clear message that Russia is not negotiating. The hundreds of missiles and UAVs deployed last night marked the beginning of Ukraine's darkest hour. The devastation signaled more than just physical destruction, it foreshadowed a grim future for Ukraine. As the sun rose, the full extent of the previous night's assault became chillingly clear. Yesterday might go down in history as the day when Ukraine's fate was sealed. No victories were reported from the front lines, no signs of hope emerged from the battlefield. Instead, Ukraine faced the cold, hard reality. All their bets had been placed on KKA, and every single one of those bets had failed miserably. KKK, the supposed stronghold, the green star of Ukraine's strategy, was reduced to nothing more than a battlefield of shattered dreams. And as if this military disaster wasn't enough, Russia's strikes had plunged Ukraine into literal and figurative darkness. The nation's energy grid, already strained, was pushed to the brink. Now millions of Ukrainians face the prospect of a winter without power, without heat, and without hope. Let's not sugarcoat it. This was a catastrophic failure on Ukraine's part. Their leadership, blinded by false hope and misplaced confidence, has led them into a disaster from which there may be no return. The energy crisis is just the beginning. What happens when the lights go out, when the heaters stop working? How long can a nation sustain a war effort when its people are freezing in their homes, when their leaders offer nothing but empty promises? Yet while the energy crisis deepens, the situation on the ground in Tetsk is a stark reminder of just how far Ukraine has fallen. In Tetsk, the situation has gone from dire to disastrous. Once touted as an impenetrable fortress, Tetsk has now become a symbol of Ukraine's strategic failure. Russia's offensive was relentless, precise, and most importantly, successful. The defenses that Ukraine boasted about have crumbled under the weight of Russian firepower. And this isn't just about losing a town. Tetsk was one of the crucial pillars supporting the broader Ukrainian defense strategy. Its fall has sent shockwaves through the entire military command, leaving them scrambling to figure out their next move. But let's be honest, what next move could there possibly be? With Tetsk's fall, Russia has opened a path directly to Pokra, a critical junction in Ukraine's defense network. And Russia isn't just taking ground, they're taking it fast. In just one day, Russian forces advanced 25 square kilometers, leaving only the Avdiivka region in Pokra barely holding on. What we're witnessing here is the rapid disintegration of Ukraine's defensive strategy. Every kilometer lost, every town captured, brings Russia closer to a complete victory in this region. And let's not forget, this isn't happening in isolation. The fall of Tetsk is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Russia is systematically dismantling Ukraine's ability to fight back, and they're doing it with brutal efficiency. The predictions that more strongholds could fall within the week, they were optimistic. Those strongholds are falling now, faster than anyone anticipated. Ukraine is running out of time, running out of options, and most importantly, running out of hope. As the situation on the ground worsens, Ukraine's leadership finds itself increasingly isolated and desperate. Especially in the KK region, in what can only be described as a desperate and reckless gamble, Ukraine continues to funnel its dwindling forces into the Kursk region. This isn't strategy, this is sheer desperation. The odds of success are less than 1%, and yet Kiev persists, throwing good men after bad, marching them into what is effectively a death trap. What kind of leadership does this? What kind of government sacrifices its soldiers in a battle they know they cannot win? But that's the reality of Ukraine's current strategy. No thought, no plan, just desperation. And meanwhile, Russia stands firm. KK is not just a battlefield, it is now a fortified stronghold, with Russian forces digging in and preparing for any Ukrainian counteroffensive. But let's be real, there won't be a counteroffensive. Ukraine doesn't have the resources, the manpower, or the strategic advantage. This so-called gamble isn't a gamble at all, it's a march towards certain defeat. Kyiv might dress it up as a necessary sacrifice or a bold strategy, but the truth is, they are leading their soldiers into the jaws of destruction, all while clinging to the delusion that they can still turn this around. What's more, this isn't just a failure of military strategy, it's a failure of leadership. The Ukrainian government is ignoring the realities on the ground, refusing to acknowledge that KK is lost, that their efforts here are futile. Instead, they continue to send more men into the fray, knowing full well that they are sending them to their deaths. This isn't bravery, it's madness. And the worst part? The Ukrainian people are paying the price for their government's refusal to face reality. As Ukraine's leadership falters, the cracks in their resolve are becoming more evident. International alliances are becoming impossible to ignore. Ukraine's once solid international support is crumbling, much like its front lines. Poland, once a vocal supporter, has now refused Zelensky's desperate plea for more MiG fighters, citing their own national security concerns. And this isn't an isolated incident, this is a trend. Countries that once stood by Ukraine are now stepping back, re-evaluating their commitments. Zelensky might still believe in his victory plan, but let's be honest, how can there be victory when even your closest allies are walking away? And then there's the matter of Zelensky's so-called grand plan to defeat Russia. He talks about presenting this plan to Biden, Harris, and Trump, as if that will somehow change the course of the war. But here's the reality. Zelensky's plan is as hollow as his promises to the Ukrainian people. The fate of Ukraine no longer rests in his hands, it rests in the hands of Joe Biden. And even Biden's support is starting to waver. The US might still be providing aid, but the enthusiasm is gone, replaced by caution and hesitation. Why? Because even in Washington, the reality is starting to set in. The situation in Ukraine is deteriorating rapidly, and no amount of diplomatic rhetoric or financial aid is going to change that. The narrative of a strong, resilient Ukraine standing up to Russian aggression is falling apart, and the world is starting to see it for what it is: propaganda. The West's strategy of pumping billions into a failing war effort is no longer tenable, and countries are beginning to look for the exit as the West's support begins to wane. Russia's strategic positioning only strengthens both in Ukraine and across the globe. While Ukraine's allies hesitate and reconsider, Russia is doing the exact opposite, doubling down, reinforcing its positions, and preparing for the long haul. Moscow has already transferred 30,000 additional troops to Kherson, ensuring that any Ukrainian attempt to reclaim the region will be met with overwhelming force. This isn't just about holding territory, this is about making a statement. Russia is here to stay, and they're not going anywhere. Every soldier, every tank, every missile that arrives in Kherson is a message to Ukraine and the West. We're not just winning, we're ensuring that you can never come back. And what is the West doing? Hesitating. The US, which once boldly declared its support for Ukraine, is now reluctant to allow Kiev to strike deeper into Russian territory. Why? Because they know the consequences. They know that pushing Russia too far could lead to a catastrophe that no one wants to deal with. So they hesitate, they second-guess, they stall. Meanwhile, Russia continues to build its strength, preparing for whatever comes next. This hesitation is more than just a tactical error, it's a sign of the West's declining influence. The days of unchallenged Western dominance are over, and Ukraine is the battlefield where this new reality is being hammered home. Every day that Russia strengthens its positions in Kherson is another day that the West's strategy unravels. Ukraine is no longer the bright, shining symbol of Western resolve. It's a reminder of the limits of that resolve and of the price that comes with overreaching. But as the West falters in Ukraine, Russia's strategic maneuvers are reshaping the entire geopolitical landscape, particularly in Asia. As Ukraine struggles, the geopolitical focus is shifting eastward, where Russia's influence is growing by the day. In Indonesia, the signs are clear. A US-backed color revolution is in the works, aimed squarely at encircling China. The Malacca Strait, a vital artery for Chinese trade, is now in the crosshairs of Western strategists. The goal? To install a pro-Western government in Jakarta that can control this critical choke point. But this isn't just about trade routes, it's about power. If the US can control the Malacca Strait, they can strangle China's economy, dealing a blow that Beijing might not recover from. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The West's track record with these kinds of operations isn't exactly stellar. Remember the last time they tried to pull something like this in the Middle East? It didn't end well, and there's no reason to believe that Asia will be any different. The region is far more complex, far more resistant to external influence. And as the West pushes harder, it's only a matter of time before they meet with significant resistance, not just from China, but from the entire region. Russia, meanwhile, is watching these developments with interest. Moscow knows that as the West overextends itself in Asia, opportunities will arise. Opportunities to strengthen its own position, to forge new alliances and to counterbalance Western influence. The geopolitical chessboard is shifting, and Russia is perfectly positioned to take advantage of the West's missteps. Every move the US makes in Asia is another chance for Russia to solidify its role as a global power, unchallenged by Western arrogance. But Asia isn't the only theater where the West is playing a dangerous game. Myanmar and Bangladesh are next on the list. In Myanmar, the situation is escalating, and it's becoming increasingly clear that the West has a hand in it. The emergence of the so-called kooky state is no coincidence. This is a classic Western playbook in action. Advanced American weapons are appearing in this remote region, a clear sign that something bigger is at play. The kooky state, stretching across the borders of India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, is more than just a new entity. It's a potential Western outpost, a Trojan horse designed to destabilize the region and keep China and India on edge. This isn't just about regional instability, it's about global strategy. By creating a new state in this volatile area, the West is trying to carve out a foothold in Asia, a foothold that could be used to project power and influence across the region. But this is a risky move. China and India are not going to sit back and watch as the West sets up shop in their backyard. This is a provocation, and it could lead to a significant escalation in regional tensions. The kooky state is more than just a geopolitical pawn, it's a symbol of the West's desperation. As their influence wanes in other parts of the world, they're looking for new ways to assert their dominance. But this strategy is fraught with danger. The region is a powder keg, and the introduction of a new Western-backed state could be the spark that sets it off. And once that happens, there's no telling where the conflict could spread. As the West plays with fire in Asia, the situation in Ukraine serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of overreach. As Colonel Douglas MacGregor has highlighted, this conflict's outcome was clear from the start. Ukraine's struggle in Kherson and beyond is the final act in a losing battle. The West, chasing ambitions in Asia, must now face the reality of its declining influence as Ukraine's resistance unravels. That's all for today, folks. See you again in the next episode. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the global implications of these power shifts.